Good afternoon. I'm Christina Gabuardi, Coordinator of Public Programs here at the Linda Hall Library. Thank you for joining us today for How Do I Become a Tech Professional? This interactive program is specifically designed to give viewers the opportunity to ask questions to our panelists about what it takes to become a tech professional. To ask your questions, type them down in the Q&A chat box you see down below. If you're watching on Facebook, type them in the comment section. We are pleased to be joined today by Naya Bere, a software developer, tech advocate, and tech content creator. She also goes by the Black Female Engineer on her socials. Next on the panel, we have Jenna Beckett. Jenna Beckett is a full-stack developer and CompTIA technical certified trainer. Naya, Jenna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start out with you, Naya. Could you tell us a little bit about your career path and how you ended up in the tech field?
Yeah, my career path is pretty hilarious because I graduated from the University of Colorado at Boulder, May of 2020. Now, if we recall, around that time, things were just ridiculous. And now around, the spring and May, people had all the time in the world. A lot of people chose that time to better themselves, make bread. And I decided to learn to code just for the sake of learning it. And within about a few days, I was so captivated by what I was building and what I was learning in a way I had never felt in finance. And so pretty quickly, within a few weeks, was looking for a way to become a software engineer. Now, again, I graduated May of that spring. And so here I am looking for a career change. Meanwhile, I'm over here taking pictures and accepting congratulations for the finance and accounting degree I just earned. And yeah, decided to just, again, take this pause in the world to be like, okay, this is your chance to learn everything you need to learn with very little kind of like consequence, especially because I had friends whose jobs were being revoked and everything in the midst of the chaos. And so I was like, you know what? Okay, let me go to a coding boot camp. I joined a coding boot camp, Flatiron School, June of 2020. And for those who don't know, a coding boot camp is a very rigorous just program. They span between like a couple months. Mine was 4 months to 6 months to a year plus. And so mine was 4 months, did 40 to 60 hours of coding every single week. And October of 2020 accepted my job now. And so I work at Comcast. I'm a software engineer at Comcast, worked on the DreamWorks team this last year. Now I'm on the Xfinity team, and it's been amazing. So lots of twists and turns there. And so decided to share my story on platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and everything with, the Black Female Engineer.
That is a fantastic way to spend the pandemic. And now, Jenna, could you tell us a little bit about your professional trajectory and how you found your way to the tech field?
Sure. I started college with the idea of being a graphic designer, and took my first couple classes and found that it wasn't generally analytic enough for me. So I had taken one psychology class and thought, oh, I love this. So I went through and got my degree in psychology and came out and promptly did not use that degree, went into the field of construction management. And I spent about 10 years in that industry. Towards the end of my tenure in that industry, I was actually tasked with putting together the design for a custom tool for the company I worked for. And through that process, the developers that we worked with to build this, I was just asking them so many questions because I was so amazed at what I was seeing on my screen. I had also always just really been the person in my family, in whatever office or friend group, that was like, oh, she's the techie, go ask her questions, because I was always on technology, engaged with it. I remember making my MySpace page a very long time ago, really awesome with HTML and CSS. And after that experience and being able to work closely with developers from the design side, I also decided to go to a coding boot camp. after going through the coding boot camp, I mean, I knew immediately it was something that I absolutely adored. And I came out, was a software engineer for a state agency. I've worked in sports tech. I've done coding education, and now currently work in a healthcare tech company.
That is fascinating. So, what exactly is the training that someone needs to succeed in this field? Naya, you said you were in that boot camp for 4 months. And is that typically the time span for that? What is it for the average person who enters this?
Yeah, that's such a hard question because yeah, people look at my time and be like, oh, like especially from me not knowing to code at all to getting a job that was 6 months. If you're like, oh, 6 months, like call it a day. But things that I try to very much stress is I did not have dependents. I did not have people who relied on me. And so I was able to go job free for those 6 months, lived in my parents' basement, and focused only on coding in that time. Something I kind of broke down was because I was when people kept asking, like, yeah, how long does it take? I was like, okay, let me try to find an answer. And what I did was I looked at the hours I spent within the 6 months, and that came out to 1,200 hours. And overall, it depends on what your ultimate goal is. So for me, and it looks like for Jenna as well, it was like, okay, full stack development or like web development. And so there, the focus is HTML, CSS, JavaScript for front end, and that can also be used back end as well. And so if you can really get ingrained in like one language, I always recommend JavaScript, then you can kind of go on and vast to like the vast other languages because you know the one now.
Interesting. And Jenna, you're a trainer, a certified technical trainer. What is the average time span someone's spending to become, you know, adept?
So it does completely depend on the path you want to take. And I would recommend before, especially if you're a career changer, or someone who has went through college, maybe has a degree, but is looking at a path in technology, do some research on the positions that are available, because developer and software engineer is a very small subset of what is available. And a lot of coding boot camps, quote unquote, now have specialized tracks where you could focus in on just working in databases, or you could focus in on just doing front-end design. All of these are paths in technology, and the paths are associated with different timeframes. I would say the full stack developer time frame is probably the longest, and you know, the biggest uphill to climb, because you are full stack means that you're learning to code from where the data is stored all the way through to where the user interacts with an application. And there's a lot of languages and platforms and software that you have to learn in between. So it is the most rigorous. But you could certainly get away with a program if you want to find a very small niche that lasts 2 months, or could even be shorter than that. I would say the most important thing is knowing that you are going to spend a lot of time, especially if you're going through some kind of boot camp. It's accelerated, and most of them will tell you that 1 month in their program is like an entire semester of college. So just know that it's kind of a pause on life and some time to just focus on one singular thing to really be successful as an outcome going through those expedient tracks.
Yeah, sounds intense. What is a typical work day for you guys? What does that look like? Are you working remote? Is it in person, team, solo? We'll stay with you, Jenna. What does your typical work day look like?
I have a really unique position. I get to both write code and I get to teach it as well. So my day just completely depends on the hat I'm wearing that day. So sometimes it's me, you know, in a virtual environment with a couple of other people, learning a new coding language, or even learning a specific platform that the company I work for uses. Alternately, if I'm writing code, then, you know, it's kind of a solo mission where I'm just, you know, in the code base that I'm working in, problem solving, writing code, maybe reaching out to a team member if I have a question or, want to bounce some ideas off of them. With COVID easing up, we do have the ability to go into our office, so kind of a hybrid work environment. But most of our team still is in a remote role most of the time.
All right. And how about you, Naya? Is that similar or different to what you are experiencing?
Yeah, so for me, and this took some some months to frame out how I like my day to look like. I am a remote worker. And with that, there comes a lot of like flexibility with it, which is like really, really nice. But it's also like, oh my goodness, like I'm a new developer. I don't know what I should be spending my time on. And so what I ended up doing was, for me, the beginning of my day, it's like 9 a.m. to noon. It's filled with like mostly like either like meetings. So like we have these things called like stand-ups where it's like, okay, we all come in together and each of the developers talk about everything they worked on before, like the day before, and is planning to work on today. And it's something that just helps the team stay accountable and allows us all to see what we're working on. And so starts with stand up, and I then go on to kind of see like, okay, like reflecting like, okay, what things was I stuck on yesterday? What blockers did I have? And just take that time to plan out. And then in the afternoon, that's when I'm actually like this, like, coder. And that's what's, to be honest, nice for me being a more entry-level developer. I came to this field because I like to code. I think some people say like the higher you go up, the less and less code you do. And so it's nice right now where it's like, I just get a task and it's like, okay, now let me spend these next like 2 hours, 3 hours, either coding or debugging. That's really what the only thing I have to worry about day by day. But because of that, and because of like the entry level position I'm in, it's very much pretty consistent day by day. Mornings, meetings, and catching up and planning. Then afternoons, like, okay, let me get this code out.
I see. Okay, well, we've got some questions coming into the Q&A. One of them asks, did you do any hackathons or other types of networking events to help make connections in the industry? Naya, you can answer this one first. Did you attend any of those? Did they help?
I did not attend them, but I highly recommend y'all do. I am so introverted. It's pretty insane. So like everything I did to try to gain a network, it was done virtually. So instead of like attending hackathons, what I would do, like for example, is like I would make sure I had a really big LinkedIn presence, and I was DMing people who worked at the jobs that I was applying for. And I was just like, hi, I'd love a quick 10-minute coffee chat to discuss. What I did is I found either women or people of color to reach out to say like, hey, because we are in a demographic that isn't predominant in this field, I would love to hear about your experience at this company. And then that conversation would turn into now the job, and I'd give my pitch on why, I'm a good candidate, but be like, can I have some advice? Because there's this saying that's like, ask for advice, get a job, ask for a job, get advice. And so that's how I got my networking in, but I highly recommend do hackathons as well. I just was not strong enough. Yeah.
That's totally understandable. Jenna, do you have any experience with that or any advice about that?
Yes. So because I had the luxury of coming out of my coding bootcamp pre-COVID, when in-person events were still a big thing and are thankfully now coming back, networking is something that I put a lot of focus on. And honestly, that networking that I did early on has helped me get every role I have had since I've entered the tech field. There are a lot of studies out there that show you're up to 14 times more likely to land a role if you are able to secure some kind of recommendation from someone who already works in a company, or at least get some insider insight on how to navigate the interview process. So a couple of really great organizations, some of these local, some of them global. For Kansas City, KC Women in Tech is an extremely amazing grassroots organization started by just women in technology in the community, and is still run volunteer, completely run volunteer to this day. They have a lot of programming that helps people, get into technology, and also not just, adults or, women. It also helps kids. They have kids programs that help them introduce technology concepts early on. Another organization that I just absolutely adore is the AnitaB.org Foundation. This is for Anita B, who's a very famous female technologist. And they do the largest women in technology gathering every year. It's actually going on right now, called the Grace Hopper Conference. And they do a lot of scholarships, especially for college age women. And you can get in and you can go, gather with people and just really get to know other folks and learn about different positions and companies. And it's a great networking opportunity. Those are a lot of women in tech organizations, because I am a woman in tech, but there's a lot of, just community, like affiliate programs that you can search online as well, that can help you with networking, whether you want to do things in person or whether you want to do them virtually, engaging with them on social media, following their Twitter, their LinkedIn. These are all really good ways for you to kind of dip your toe in the waters of networking.
That is great to know. And Eric has dropped a couple of those links in the chat. So if any of you guys want to check out those, that foundation or KC Women in Tech, just look at the chat. And it looks like we've got some more questions rolling in. Somebody asks, would either of you recommend studying abroad for a comp sci degree focusing on software engineering / development? Either of you have an opinion on this one?
I going through a coding boot camp, I did not get a computer science 4-year degree, so I don't have a lot of perspective on this. I know that there are a lot of, just from like tech organizations and tech gatherings, a lot of them happen in the UK and Scandinavia. So those would be benefits because of large tech communities in those areas. But I don't know of any overt gains from doing those programs overseas.
And Naya,
Yes.
you've got a degree in finance, so I wonder what you have to say about this one.
Yeah, for me, I don't believe in like a wrong path. It's really about, okay, what are the things most important to you? And what's so amazing about this field is it's global and it's remote, and there really isn't a reason why being, remote or international should make it so that you can't enter this field. And if studying abroad is something that's very important to you, especially if you're college age or late teens, like, you have time, like, so do that, and computer science and software engineering and tech, it's here and it is growing and it'll wait for you. So that's my insight on that.
Yeah, I was very surprised to see just how large the demand is in this area, and it's just growing. It shows no sign of stopping. And so we've got some more questions. Can anyone speak on what it takes to work in cybersecurity? I don't know if either of you guys have a strong opinion on that one. Jenna, do you have anything on that?
I would say that I do not fulfill a cybersecurity role right now, but back to my earlier comment about specialized niche programs, there are a number of them out there, would be equivalent of a coding bootcamp for a full stack engineer to cybersecurity professionals. I would say that there are a lot of professional organizations for cybersecurity. Again, getting in, networking, asking those questions to professionals working in the field, I would highly recommend. But if you're looking for an expedited path, there are those out there for cybersecurity as well.
Yeah, and in general, for anyone looking for insight on a field, on a specialty, there's so many free resources out there for you to like dip your toe in and start doing the learning. Something I really try my best to echo like over and over is like, I beg of you, do not join a coding bootcamp because like, oh, like Naya joined a coding bootcamp and I want to be a software engineer. And so let me do that. Like I did about 2 months of self-teaching before I joined a bootcamp. And the only reason I did a bootcamp was because I'm just a person who I can't teach myself. I need somebody to be accountable to, but I don't think that if I didn't go to a boot camp, I don't think that would have been like over for me. And so for in terms of like resources, I really love Free Code Camp. For resources on career tracks, they have like a web development course, data science course, machine learning course. So they're phenomenal. And that's the very first thing I went to when I first started learning to code. That and Code Academy is the same. They're paid, but they have a free version. And again, I really love that resource. In terms of, yeah, things to maybe like dabble in while seeing if you want to go into cybersecurity, depending on the specific cybersecurity track, because it's so big. Something I recommend to people is like, okay, data management is a big thing to kind of see how you like it. So like learning about SQL, learning a little bit like with Python, but again, there's those resources to help you do that. So definitely dabble a bit and shop around for resources before maybe jumping into like a bootcamp, especially the ones that are so expensive and time consuming.
Yeah,
I would
that's
totally
good to
echo
know.
what Naya said. There is another resource out there from MIT, actually. You can take some of their courseware online for free, and it's opencourseware.mit. And you can go out, and I was actually just out there this morning looking for resources, and they have cybersecurity courses on that site.
Oh, that's great to know. And if anybody watching is interested in diving deeper into cybersecurity, we did record and we were live with a how do I become a cybersecurity specialist. So if anyone wants to look that up, you can just go to lindahall.org. We've got that archived. Check that out. We've got more questions coming in. Can you talk about the job interview process? Do you have to actually make an app, a website, etc., to prove you can do it?
Yeah,
Naya,
I
we'll start
can.
with you.
Yeah, we can start with me. Oh my goodness, job interviews are terrible. With this field, the job interview process was typically for me, and again, I'm entry level, so everything I did was either junior developer or entry level developer, so it might be different for higher ups. But for me, it was first round of, so like first of all, you send and submit your application, typical resume, and then if they like you, you get for me, a recruiter call, maybe like 15 minutes where they just try to say like, okay, do our like goals align? And they provide you more information about the role. If they like you with that, then for me, I would then move on to a either technical or like behavioral technical type interview where like half of it is behavioral questions, getting to know me more as a professional, and then go into some technical assessments, either verbal, asking me definitions of things, and asking like scenarios, or an actual programming, like, okay, here is a algorithmic problem, how would you solve it? And going through that. Then if I did well there would be a third round. In the third round, for me, again, I was entry level positions. A lot of the third rounds were multiple hours long. The position I have now, I did a 6-hour interview day for them. And that included things like the behavioral, the technical, a case interview. And that's not uncommon. I'd say that was about 50%. And then the other 50%, it was another like behavioral technical switch. But I think of many developers will say like, oh my goodness, the interview prep you have to do is pretty, for me, in my personal opinion, is kind of outdated. Because the whole point of being a software engineer is proving that you know how to problem solve and that you can find the answer. And with technical interviews, it's like you kind of sometimes have to know that answer outright, which is pretty unrealistic. But yeah, preparing for interviews, it's a lot of the practice with the coding problems and coding challenges, but you really have to remember to take the time to interview them as well. Make sure you ask them questions, ask them about their culture within the office, and get everything that you would like to see in a company or in a manager. Make sure you ask those questions. But yes, typically it was like those 3 rounds for me in the entry level space.
Yeah, that sounds kind of high pressure. Jenna, is it similar, your experience with that?
So I've actually been on both sides. I've been the interviewee and the interviewer. And I would say in any tech role, anticipate a multi-stage interview. I would say probably 3 is about the minimum that you're going to do. And sometimes those require pre-work. So sometimes you'll get a coding assessment ahead of time that you're asked to complete within a certain amount of time. Usually it's about 48 hours. And submit that. And then based on your responses to those initial challenges, then you might move on to some, behavioral interviews. There's also, the potential to do whiteboarding where you're asked some type of situation, and then you have to draw out how you would solve the problem. I will say that, as you are going through these interviews, it is the interviewer's job to find the limits of your knowledge. So it's really important to walk into these knowing that the best thing you can do for yourself is show your thought process. So even if you're asked a question and you don't know the answer to it right away, saying something along the lines of, well, I don't know for sure, but it sounds like, or it could be a part of, or I would solve it this way, or even these are the resources I would use to answer this question if I were, day-to-day working as a developer. All really important things you can do. I also think showing that you can learn in the interview. So if you're asked a technical question you don't know the answer to, expressing interest, can you tell me a little bit about this? Let's go back and forth and have, an experience where you're showing me something and I'm actively showing you how I can pick up on concepts and relate it to things I already know. All those are really important parts of the interview process. The original question asked if you had to make an app to be able to get an interview. I will say that it is really important in this field to have a portfolio site. And that's a website that you've built that provides information about you. A lot of times there's a work portfolio where you provide links to projects that you've done. Now, if you have a long professional history, then maybe some of these are actually business sites that you've built, but it can also be practice projects that you've built. And showing a history in GitHub or some other version control system that allows employers to go out and see that you're coding on a regular basis and continually improving. Another really important way you can show your skills as a developer.
All right. So a lot of hoops for sure. We have someone in the Q&A saying, this is from Imani. Amani asked, would either of you be willing to volunteer for a STEM after-school program? They teach coding as part of Million Girls Moonshot. We'll get that link over to both of you guys for your consideration. Sounds like a cool program. We've got another question. Can each of you talk a bit about your specific experience with the coding bootcamp? What was it like and how many hours a week was it? Did you feel ready to apply to jobs after this? Patricia asked that. Naya, would you like to go?
Yeah, I very much loved my bootcamp experience. I like to say that with like a bit of like, an asterisk, because coding bootcamp, I think, they're notorious for providing different experiences for different cohorts and things like that. But to speak on my experience, it was 4 months from June to October, and we did 40 to 60 hours of work per week of class time. Class time was 9 to 5, and then I'd stay awake like afterwards to continue through the practice and the homework and the challenges and everything. Day by day, And the reason I really loved my boot camp is day by day, what the teachers did was they opened the floor up to ask, okay, what do you want to learn from us? Like, you see what the lesson plan was like this last week. What do you need more practice on? And so people would be like, I really am struggling with Ruby, or I'm really struggling with JavaScript. Can we hone in more on that? And so on top of the regular course material that they had planned, they would add in more lectures for that. And it was really great because they had about 5 teachers. Not all boot camps have that many resources. And then in terms of the way it was broken up, it was like a month by month, like 3 weeks by 3 weeks, where every 3 weeks it was a different what would you call, like a phase. And there were 5 phases total. First week it was learning heavy. It was like, we're going to lectures, we're going to do the homeworks, we're going to really get that practice in. Second week was test heavy, and so it was like, hey, here's this coding challenge, here's this test, you have 4 attempts to pass it. If you don't, you maybe dropped to the cohort after you. But that's, hopefully that does not happen. So that was the second week. And then third week was project heavy. So they'd say, okay, based on what we learned this phase, make a project, make a web app with JavaScript, with Ruby, with a database being pulled in, with an API. And we did that 5 times, with the last phase 5, being focused on a big capstone project where you spent the entire 3 weeks really just building out something big. And because I knew that at the end of this, I want a job immediately, I made it so that every single project we did, I didn't treat it as like practice or like, turning something in, but I was like, hey, I need to make this a portfolio project, something I'd be proud to add on to that. And so I did that phase by phase. And so by the halfway point, or like a little bit after the halfway point, that's when I started applying to jobs, because now I had about 3 projects under my belt, had the portfolio site like Jenna was talking about, and kept on. That's how I went about my boot camp experience. But yes, very rigorous. It was full-time, virtual / in-person, because it was COVID. But yeah.
How about you, Jenna? Did you feel ready to apply for jobs after the boot camp? What was your experience there?
So I would say that the first thing you need to know about coding boot camps is most of them teach a breadth of knowledge, meaning that you're getting lightly deep information across many components that you could potentially even specialize in as your role as a developer. So yes, I felt prepared to apply to jobs. Did I feel like I was going to walk in and know absolutely everything? No. Did I feel like I was going to walk in and need to continue to work hard and learn? Yes, for my first job. Yes, for my second job. Yes, for my third job. And it just keeps going on. One thing you should know about going into the tech field is that if you are not passionate about learning, then it may not be the field for you, because it changes so rapidly. You need to commit yourself to continuing to hone your skills and keep them updated so that you're building relevant applications to what's going on in the industry. So, my experience, I loved it. I went through Centric Training, and they provided, a similar format to what Naya talked about, of going through different phases. Their approach is kind of building you up from the back end all the way to the front end. So start by understanding logic, then go on to understanding databases, go on to understanding the front end, and then let's start bringing all those pieces together. One thing I would say that I've experienced just from working with folks who took the traditional college comp sci degree route is that coding boot camps do have the benefit of being able to change their curriculum a lot more rapidly, so they can keep up with changing frameworks and versions of languages and platforms that are being used in the industry. And colleges don't necessarily have that same luxury. So while I think colleges and students coming out of college have probably a deeper theoretical understanding of computer science. The advantage of coding boot camps is they kind of have the benefit of having the tactile information and knowledge to go in and apply it directly to the frameworks and platforms they'll use right out of school.
Yeah, and like piggybacking off of that, on top of being able to like change the curriculum quickly based on the emerging technology and changing technology, coding boot camps also have pretty solid, like big / like really good ones. They have pretty solid ties with tech companies, and they are in constant communication with what those companies want in new hires. And so after I graduated my boot camp, within a couple months, they actually changed their curriculum completely because they were responding to what companies were saying. We want our developers to do this, this is this. And so that's, yeah, another great benefit, like Jenna was saying.
That's so true. And if you are looking at coding boot camps, think about where you want to live and work when you come out of your coding boot camp, because those connections, they often make them with local tech companies. And there are languages that are used heavily in parts of the country that are almost non-existent in terms of roles in other parts of the country. So thinking about where you want to go and finding a boot camp, a reputable boot camp in that area, I say has a really big benefit because they're likely very connected with the languages and skills that are needed in that particular market.
All right. And on that same theme, we've got a question from one of the attendees. I am afraid of being scammed by a boot camp. How can you tell the difference between a good one and a scam? Jenna, any thoughts on that?
Yes. Look for reviews. And I would say that there are definitely ways for companies to eliminate the bad reviews. So don't just look on Google reviews. Don't just look at the reviews section of their website, whoever you're looking at. Go out and do your research. I mean, I went from, like Course Report all the way to Reddit, like asking questions about the boot camp that I was going to go through, and totally anticipated finding bad reviews and kind of having to use my judgment of whether this is something that sounds like a big deal breaker for me. And I frankly had a hard time finding bad reviews. So to me, that was a really good sign. The other thing, the coding bootcamp that I went through, is I went in and talked to an educational advisor, and they gave me the name of some alumni that I could look up on LinkedIn and reach out and get like an insider's perspective. And even if the bootcamp you're looking at doesn't offer that, you could probably go out and search LinkedIn for the name of the boot camp, whatever the name is, with an asterisk, and it's going to bring back a whole list of people who have that listed on their profiles. And, kind of what Naya was saying earlier, reach out and start a conversation. Say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Would you be willing to share some information with me? And I think you'll get a good bit of responses from people who are willing to share both good and maybe not so good experiences.
Naya,
Yeah,
do you have anything on that?
yeah, everything Jenna said is, especially the LinkedIn one, is something I 1000% agree with and really try to share with others. I actually pulled up because, like mentioned, I'm on Instagram and TikTok, so I recently did a post of things to ask or think about or consider before joining a coding bootcamp. So I pulled that up, trying to see what things specifically I noted. And although, as Jenna mentioned, there are ways for the boot camps to kind of be misleading with reviews and things like that, a baseline place to start is to look at things like their average graduation rate. They should have some type of report that states this, even with like what they consider as graduation rate. Same thing with job placement rate. What do they consider as placement rate, and in what timeline, specifically what timeline? 3 months after graduation, 6 months, a year, are they including that rate? Looking at the tuition and payment options, looking at the support offered during the boot camp. Can you reach out to teachers when it's not like lecture time? Do they email, like email communication? Is that a thing? Are they helpful in that sense? career services, do they help you get a job? Do they have career services? And with career services, they're great for reviewing your resume, doing maybe or setting you up with mock interviews, and just giving you those things to consider and just practice on while you are in that job hunt phase. And so, yeah, now I'll put that away. But yes, those are things that on top of really talking to people who went through the boot camp and aren't being paid by the boot camp, start off by, if you can't find that information through their reports, they should have reports. Sometimes it's deep in there, but talk to them directly, give them a call, give them emails, and send these questions, because this is, your potential livelihood. This is your potential, life. So like, this is not the time to be shy. So those are my recommendations.
Yeah, that's so true, especially about career services. I mean, one thing that sold me on the boot camp that I went through is that they don't treat you as, okay, you graduated, you have your first job, now we're done. You're an alumni for the rest of your career. They do continuing education for their alumni. And if you want to change jobs later on, whether it be your fourth job, your fifth job, you can reach back out to them. They'll do resume and portfolio reviews, provide you advice. It's kind of like an alumni for life situation with the one I went through. And that was a big selling point, because it's like having a career cheerleader and guide, and going out and getting a career coach can be an expensive endeavor, and having it be a part of your educational experience, I think is really valuable.
That's fantastic. Have any of you had an internship? If so, what are some of the expected responsibilities or duties of a tech intern? We'll stick with you, Jenna. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I never did an internship in technology, but I do, for the company I work at, lead our internship program with some of my coworkers. So we just went through this, and I can speak specifically for what our interns did. They actually participated fully with our developer strike teams. They were an integrated part of the team, meaning that as a developer, like Naya talked about, picking up tasks and working on them, debugging them, building the code out for them on your own, our interns did that as well. In addition, our interns were tasked with, doing some type of capstone project to demonstrate the skills that they had learned throughout their program, and provided many networking opportunities to, develop connections within our company, and help, just professional connections overall. I think it is very reasonable as a tech intern, especially if you're going in for software engineering, to expect to work in a live code base. I think that's a good question to ask as you're doing the internship interviews as well, because the internships you're going to get the most out of is when you're in those live production environments, contributing as the other software engineers do. I know there's some internship programs out there where you kind of just make mock projects. I find those I'm sure they're very valuable experiences, but I think, the heart of an internship is understanding the industry and what it's like to fulfill the role. And as a software engineer, that means participating in just the normal flow of writing code and committing it and then deploying it. So those are those daily tasks, the same ones that a software engineer or developer would perform. That's what I would expect out of a internship program. And then you're just making sure that there's also some type of mentorship built into it, so that you do have someone that, you can ask questions to, because you are going to likely walk into a very foreign environment. No education setting can truly prepare you for what it's like to be a software engineer day in and day out, and having someone to help you walk through that process with just ensures success in your experience.
How about you, Naya? Any internship advice or experience there?
See, I don't have internship advice really, because I started, after college, and went really quickly into my entry-level role. But one of my teams did have an intern that we worked with, and The biggest advice I have is to not, it's so easy as an intern to be afraid to like speak up, but don't be afraid to like speak up about the things that interest you. If you are working for like the last intern we had was when I was on the DreamWorks team. And so if you're working at DreamWorks and you're really interested in a special type of like, let's say, the color engineers or the sound engineers and how they streamline that throughout like across screens and things like that. That's very specific, but don't be afraid to voice that out, because companies, if they're good, they want their interns to come back, because these are resources that they're pouring into you. The managers, making sure that they are giving you the knowledge you need to be successful here, they want you to come back, because then it wasn't only for just those 3 months and now you're taking that knowledge to a different company. And so don't be afraid to say like, hey, I would really like to learn more about this, or thank you for this project, here it is, but these are the things I learned and I'd really like to see how I can shift more to X, Y, and Z. Do not be, or you can be afraid, but do it anyway. Make sure you're speaking up about those things.
All right. You're both great speakers. How important is it to have soft skills in your job? Writing, speaking, any tips on how to develop that? Naya, we'll stick with you. Any tips about soft skills?
Yeah, soft skills, especially with me and like Jenna as well, we came from different fields and different tracks. And so for me personally, it was the soft skills. I was really like, look, I know I'm not the first pick in terms of technical skill, but like, look at my ability to communicate, look at my ability to like problem solve and see things in different ways. And so with that, I say soft skills are very important. Really, the most important ones, like off the top of my head, communication is a huge one, because if you have this code that's like breaking or not working the right way, you need to be able to communicate that with your members, team members, in a way that's easy to understand, because code is just so easy to kind of like go off like the wrong track. And so you need to be the type of person who can actually see what the problem is and now communicate it. Communication is a huge one. Being detail oriented is a humongous one. And it's like with just those two examples, even if you came from a different field, if you can show that you use and developed those skills and can explain that in interviews and on your resume, that puts you in such an amazing place. Because at the end of the day, like with me, with Jenna, like we learned how to program, but now can we actually be valuable members of a development team? And that's what really soft skills really show.
Any opinions on that one, Jenna?
Yeah, Naya is completely right. This is, you know, I always think back to like how I see people in the tech industry portrayed in movies, and it's always someone sitting alone in the basement who doesn't want to talk to anyone else. And that's so far from what you need to be as a developer, because yes, you do a lot of work on your own, but development is a team sport. You are working with your teammates, you're bouncing ideas off them. You're not only working with developers, but you're working with product and design, potentially even marketing and sales. I mean, you are, especially if you work for a SaaS company or software as a service company, you know, you're going to kind of be like the center point of what's going on in the organization, and you need to be able to communicate about that. Additionally, as a developer and wanting to advance your career, learning to communicate in terms of, you know, to who the audience is you're speaking to, whether it be a technical audience or whether it be an audience that maybe has never written code in their life, being able to communicate what you're doing to those different audiences, it not only helps, you know, show you as a professional, but it helps you learn. You know, there's a saying about, you know, the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else. And I couldn't agree with that more. That honestly is the best way to learn something and cement your own knowledge. I highly encourage people, no matter how early you are in your career, get into technical speaking, write blog posts on Medium, write talks that you could give at technical conferences and apply to speak at those technical conferences. I have friends who have traveled the world who are junior developers because they have proposed talks about being a junior developer or hiring junior developers or just a new way of learning something to tech conferences overseas, and have been able to travel and share their experience and just get really great professional connections along the way. So those soft skills are extremely important. And the last thing I would say is that you've never had a job that is not valuable in your career. I have had so many students who have come through and said, well, I don't know how I'm going to get a job. I've just been a server, or I've just been a bartender, I've just been a manager at McDonald's. And my response to them was, and you learn so much from that. You can spin any role and take the skills, find the essential skills you learned in the role and apply it to where you're going. And, you know, it does take a lot of critical thinking, and you have to spend some time. Getting a job in any industry, but especially the tech industry, is a job itself. So taking and thinking about your experiences, how you say them, how you present yourself, your elevator pitch, is a really good investment in yourself. And it's not gonna just serve you for the immediate future of getting that first job, but it's gonna serve you throughout your entire career.
That's great advice. And we've got a question from Facebook. Let's see. You both have talked a little bit about being women in the tech field. Could you talk about some of the challenges and opportunities faced by women and or BIPOC people entering this industry? Naya, any opinions on that?
Yeah, so I'll start off with saying that I'm lucky that in my actual like job opportunities and teams, I haven't experienced anything jarring in terms of experiencing the bias people have when, you know, talking to me and looking at me and seeing that I'm in this field, or that I'm their coworker. I haven't experienced anything like that. However, I have experienced times where I'm on teams away from work with other software engineers. And like there was this one time that I'll share this like quick story, where I have a project with one other individual. It's important to note that he was a white male for the story, but we are coding things out and developing, and he's like trying to figure out why something is not showing up the way like both of us want it to. It's just like not working. And so I'm like, oh, like what if you like change this line? I was like, like that doesn't look right. So what if we change that? And he's like, nope, that won't work. I'm like, interesting. And so he like keeps going through his solutions. I'm like, I'm serious. What if we changed X, Y, and Z? And then finally to like shut me up really, after like the fourth time me saying it, he was like, fine. So he changes it and then goes on to test the code in like the browser, refreshes the page. And I'm like, oh, like it works, cool. But like he didn't say anything. He like switched, refreshed, then went back to coding and minding his own business. And like to the point where I was like, did he not see that it changed? I was so confused. I was like, oh, like did you see that? He's like, yep, I saw it. I'm like, cool. I'll just say, like, there will likely, if you are here long enough, there will likely be a time where you experience just an unfortunate encounter or teammate that you can't find many reasons why this is happening other than your identity and your minority status in this field. And with that, the way I took that was I took that as an opportunity to do some actual like learning professional development as to, okay, when I'm on a team and like this really happens and this really matters, what do I do with that? And so some of the things that I really like that I'll share really quickly are, we know that whole like the constant example of you say something in the room, no one acknowledges it, somebody else with more privilege says it and everyone acknowledges it and gives it praise. Something to do there is to say, it's like, yeah, I say, oh, what if we did like 2 + 2? No one hears me. Then Sam says, oh, what if we did 2 + 2? And they're like, oh, that's great. Then be like, Thank you so much, Sam, for piggybacking off of my idea. Yeah, really what inspired this was X, Y, and Z. And like going off like into your own thing. Cause it's like, no, we all know, and especially Sam knows who like was the origin here. And so doing things like that, or simply asking things like, yeah, what do you mean by that? If someone says like an offhanded comment or makes like a weird joke or just something that rubs you off the wrong way, saying something like, yeah, like, wait, like, what do you mean by that? Pretty straight face. I love this example because it allows for two things. One, you get the opportunity to really clarify on their, intentions and what truly they meant by it. Secondly, they and everyone in the room gets an opportunity to think back on what was just said and think about how it came across in intentions. And by doing that, that can be a very easy, like not too jarring way of saying like, hey, I caught that. It rubbed me off like weird for, understandable reasons probably. Let's think about it and see how we can move forward. So yeah, sometimes it sucks that we have to think about like ways to go about these situations. I'm an introvert. I'm also like conflict, like I just avert like all conflict. And so those things help me.
Yeah, that's a great way to handle it, being direct. It's unfortunate that you would have to do that. And Jenna, you spoke about your passion about being a woman in tech. What are your experiences with that?
I've definitely had some unfortunate experiences. And one thing that I would say is for any person who is going into technology as a minority, the first thing you need to know is that you deserve to be there. And while I will love to be your cheerleader, there's actual scientific proof that you being there actually improves things. There is a number of books and studies that have been done that show if we do not have people who represent the population that will be consuming technology in the actual development of said technology, then things go wrong. Apple Health app is a very prominent example because when it was first developed, there were key parts of women's health that were not included in that application. There were no women on the original development team either. So having the general population that will use what you're building be a part of the development process and represented, that's extremely important just for the success of whatever you're building. Second of all, there are studies that have been shown that the more diversity, both in background, in experiences, lived experiences that a team has, the more high functioning and productive they are on a day-to-day basis. So the first thing I would say is just you deserve to be there. And one thing, it's not always fun to have to remind yourself of that, and it's not always easy. So everywhere I've went, I've always looked to find a community. And sometimes you're going to go in places and you're not going to have that community. A lot of larger companies do things called SIGs, special interest groups. If they're not there, approach your HR, approach your lead and say, I would be interested in starting this community. You can always be the creator of a force to help others like you kind of find that same I deserve to be there mentality. And that mentality stays across levels of experience. The junior developer deserves to be there as much as the senior developer. You have different roles to fulfill in the team. So I would say that yes, unfortunate experiences are likely to happen, and we have to continue working on improving diversity and inclusion in tech to limit the number of those unfortunate incidents that happen. I completely agree with Naya on don't sweep it under the rug, don't bottle it up inside yourself, call it out and address it head on. And it's going to have a wider effect than you think. It's going to address the situation immediately, but it's going to likely make the folks around you think more intentionally about what they say in the future. And then the last thing, just create your community. If there's not one there, you don't have to have it within your organization. You can create it if you want it, but there are a lot of, like I said, special interest groups that are community driven that you can go and find your people there.
That's really solid advice. And we're starting to hit the end of the program. So before I roll into this final question, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Naya's social media account. If anyone needs extra advice, she's got lots to say on the topic on all of her platforms, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. She's the Black female engineer on her socials. I've found a lot of interesting content there. So if anyone is looking for an extra feed of advice and perspective, that's a good place to go. Now, for the final question, we have Francisco asking, what is the most exciting project that the speakers have worked on? So, Jenna, what's something that really excited you project-wise?
I would say that JavaScript is my love language. So anytime that I get the opportunity to dive into JavaScript across tiers of development, whether it be client side or server side, that's always exciting for me. I am currently a React devotee, so that's what I dive into the most and what I get most excited about working on. And then any opportunity to help elevate someone in my community through technology, finding small businesses that just kind of need like a hand up as far as a technical presence to be able to create successful small businesses. I really like those opportunities. Kind of goes back to the hackathon question early on, giving back, using my skills for the greater good. Those are all really exciting projects.
Awesome. Naya, how about you?
Yeah, I think the most exciting project for me was one that I just got to take complete ownership of. My first few weeks working at DreamWorks, my manager shared how excited he was to have me on the team, specifically because I had the most web development experience of anyone on the team. And that was very interesting to me because I was like, going off the last questions, coming in from coding boot camp, and I'm over here oh my God, do I, deserve to be here and everything? And then they're like, oh, thank God you're here. And so getting to take ownership of a project that was a kind of managerial web app where we had the system that only allowed admins, which were 6 people, to view very key information. And because of that, it very much disrupted the workflow of my manager because he'd daily get emails about, oh, what's this? And he has to share the same information over and over again. And so he was like, no, can you please create a web app that allows the display of all of this information, the updating of all of this information, and yeah, send it out to, the DreamWorks Corporation. And so spent the entire year working on that, and it was Python and JavaScript, and I absolutely loved it. So that definitely was my most exciting project. I am on the new team now, so I haven't gone too deep into the projects, but it's Xfinity, and we're working on just more mobile app development, which I haven't done before. So I'm excited for that as well.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much, Naya and Jenna, for answering everybody's questions today. And thanks to all the viewers who tuned in today. For more information about any upcoming programs or events at the Linda Hall Library, visit lindahall.org, where I also encourage you to sign up for our e-newsletter. You can also follow us on all of our social media accounts. For the parents and teachers who tuned in today, I hope that you consider supporting the Linda Hall Library through the Linda Hall Library Foundation. Your contributions help make all of the programs possible and freely available. Thank you for joining us, and have a great weekend.